What are some examples of being street smart? Don't ever tell the cab driver you don't know where you're going. Home. I'm going home. Woman, I don't know where the fuck you live. Or better yet, know the route in advance and tell him the Mayflower Hotel. Take K Street all the way up to Connecticut Avenue. Yeah, I was nearly robbed by some cabbies in New Orleans a while ago. Geez, what happened? At the time I was camping out in the lower ninth and working at a restaurant in the French Quarter. One night after work I decided to stay at a hostel in the Garden District, walked all the way there and found out it was fully booked. So after walking back to the Quarter I decided I didn't feel like walking all the way back to the lower ninth and hopped in a taxi. Right off the bat I thought something was wrong as there were two guys up front. They seemed to treat me like a drunk tourist and wouldn't take my directions. Told me to just sit back and relax. When we got to the main road where we should have turned right, they turned left and I yelled at them until they said fine and made a U-turn to head in the right direction. Right after making the U-turn the driver got a phone call and they said hang on, they're going to pick up someone else, and they made another U-turn. Drove a couple of blocks and made one more U-turn, so now we were facing the right direction and they pulled over where a guy opened the passenger side back door to get in and I jumped out and ran away. So I was telling this story to a friend of mine who worked with me and he said the same thing happened to him. Except he actually was really drunk, so when the new passenger opened the door he didn't get out. The other guy pulled a gun and they took my friend to an ATM to empty out his bank account. I can't help but read this as another reason to skip New Orleans. If you're a tourist and lost, don't stand still to get your bearings. Go sit on a bench and look relaxed, like you're waiting for someone and just passing the time. Advice I once had when I lived the wrong side of the tracks was always walk like you have lived there for years, even if lost. Street smarts to give your kids. If you get lost, find the closest adult with kids. I saw this in action once at Disneyland when a 4-year-old kid approached me and my kiddos while we were eating. She joined us very calmly, introduced herself, and said her parents gave her the above advice. I heard her parents shouting her name not long after, and the relief on their faces was a sight. This is actually really good. Unless they're in a van and a kid says help me find my dog. Baddies often recruit children to get other kids. The movies told me anyways. The reverse is sadly true. I saw an unattended child in distress in public once and so badly wanted to help, so I, single middle-aged dude, approached the nearest woman to help me help the child. The bystander effect is a real thing, people were walking past, but if you do decide to act, approaching a third party so you can help together reduces the chances of you being accused of being a pedo kidnapper. That's a fucked up world we live in that you had to do that because single males equals pedos. I've got one. When I was younger, I'm a guy, I worked for a large retailer and we wore very identifiable uniforms. The little girl, probably like 4 or so, kind of approached me and told me she lost her papa. I assume she approached me due to my uniform, but I'm not sure. I told her no problem, we will find him, do you know your papa's name? She said yes and I had to pry a bit. I went on okay, what's his name? Papa, she said, was adorable. I told her no problem and I immediately radioed to other staff that I had a young girl who couldn't find what I assumed was her granddad and where I was, which was essentially within like 20 feet of the entrance of the damn store. The female employee who obviously knew me came rushing over and took the girl's hand and led her away from me, almost in a protective fashion, and radioed that she had the girl and told the girl to stay with her and they would find her papa. I was so demoralized and made to feel like an instant creep by a coworker who fucking knew me as I asked for help for a little girl. The way she looked at me was almost with disgust, as if they'd just found me wandering off to the washroom or parking lot or something with a random child. I was maybe 20 at the time and it's really stuck with me. If you put the box for big expensive item out on the curb you just broadcast to everything that you now have a brand new big expensive item. Dispose of that elsewhere, cut up the cardboard and fold it so the box art is inside. And out of view. The escalating and deflecting in tense situations. Knowing how to do that is the ultimate street smart in my book. Okay. So how does one do it? In all seriousness, I've talked myself out of many muggings and general unpleasantness. Different techniques depending on the individual. I am not suggesting these will work. Seemingly drunk person being belligerent equals act more drunk and unstable. Laugh at provocations in an idiot fashion and not mockingly. Stroll away. Be not worth the effort. Homeless transient looking for trouble equals mumble, shuffle, appear unsteady and act unable to understand what they are asking. Be annoyingly ignorant. They will move on. Violent and clearly intending to mug equals be confident, unafraid, but watch their body language. I've told a mugger, here is what we going to do. I'm going to give you $20, $40, whatever I hid, and that's it. No cards, because they'll be shut off before you can use them. Sound like a plan? The confidence was disarming. This will not work on all types. Mugger with sad eyes equals lean into being kinder. I asked what was going wrong and how I could help. Did they want to go get a meal together somewhere? Totally disarmed them. Gave them a few bucks for food and a big hug. I have more but this is way too long a post. Really crazy person equals go bigger. I had a guy running at me in an empty parking lot late at night in a strange city, business trip. No shame, I started squawking like a chicken and hopping up and down and then making ambulance sounds. That guy took right off. You covered a lot so just adding one that comes to mind also. Someone following you by foot when you're alone. Turn around almost rigidly and look directly at them and say loudly, do you have the time? Hey, do you know what time it is? This can be a deterrent and also show them you know they're there. The response you get will be variable, as you said it's situational, but throwing someone off guard before TFO is helpful. This has worked for me before. As for the the crazy, no shame to your chicken squawk haha, I had to pull the full foamy mouth, spastic movements, and I told them I was gonna. They don't listen, that's not on me that's not no, I told just listen to me. And that worked. The difference between a low income and a bad neighborhood is that in low income ones, people are going places, catching the bus to work, etc. In bad hoods, people are hanging out on street corners appearing to do nothing. This just moved into a bad neighborhood. All the bodegas gas stations don't open until 10 a.m. as nobody is headed out to the rat race. Everything closes usually by 9 p.m. too. Another sign is when the Taco Bell has bank teller security. Bulletproof glass and a sliding drawer to give you your food. Good rule of thumb. If there are kids around, it is probably an okay neighborhood. If the only people you see walking around are young men, perhaps not. And if the kids ever suddenly leave, get out. Adults too, people start quietly exiting, FO. When in doubt, act crazy. Just look homeless, aggressively ask for change every now and then. Nobody will want to talk to you. Hell, they'll cross the street to avoid your ass. During self-defense class, a teacher told us that when in doubt, start skipping and catching butterflies with a pretend net and sing random songs noises. Chances are pretty good that the person doesn't want to risk it and will walk away. Even criminals know to avoid crazy. Unless they themselves are crazy. I swear to God, doing something like this saved me from getting robbed one time. Good on you. We see craziness as a person with nothing to lose and why waste time trying to get bit. Keep it push until you meet Vic and Tim. I believe it. It saved a former classmate of mine too. I raised my arms and was singing and doing a little dance and the person that was just about to rob me hesitated for a second and then peeled off. I am just realizing that maybe I've not been robbed because my default setting is acting like this. Anyway, those other ladies walking down the street the other day seemed to like my silly song. If you feel like a situation might turn bad, trust that feeling. In my teens I'd go to the mall regularly and on Sundays they closed early, but I had forgotten this and didn't have a cell phone to call for a pickup, so I asked a stranger to use his. He looked conflicted, but then asked for the phone number and dialed it himself, confirmed it was a mom, then handed it to me. It took a while for me to realize he just didn't want his phone to get snatched and stolen, but wherever you are cell phone mall guy, you taught me a valuable street smart lesson about belongings that day. -1. Firm boundaries. Lending money, giving rides, loaning smokes. Learning to say no and mean it as you. 2. People helping you out can be a red flag. Never know what they expect after. 3. Walk away from people. Cross the street and keep space. 4. Keep out of business. Don't get involved with shit you don't need to get involved in. Situational awareness. Not walking around town like you're in your own private fantasy world. In Paris, we were approached by 3 young guys. I knew they were following us for at least 150 meters. They approached and wanted to take a selfie with my phone. I said no, WTF my phone the entire time. The one guy was trying to get close enough to reach around my back. I knew what he was going for, too, the pack of tissues outlined in my zipper bag that looked like a wallet. So I kept pivoting and moving and eventually walked away. This was near the Louvre, so I'm sure they just moved to the next target. Should have just reached in and pulled out a tissue. So wild to me living in Australia. We do have crime but rarely in broad daylight like that. If you are a tourist in Australia, look lost and clueless. Someone will be more likely to offer help to you. You won't get mugged if you look like you're going to mug someone. Knowing there is no shame in running away from a fight. My wife grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. She knows her shit and has been in many sketchy situations. She says that what really matters is to read the room. Disengage if you can, but if you do have to engage, be respectful and talk your way out. Even play the ditzy blonde if you have to and make a joke. Run when necessary. On an interstate trip we pulled over for dinner. Walked into a chain restaurant and got the weirdest vibe. It was stone silent and everyone was staring at us. We looked at each other, turned around and went into the restaurant next door across ya parking lot and had a good meal. When we left there were police cars sirens all over outside the other place. Minus 100% it was actively being robbed when you walked in. Holy shit. That's fucking terrifying. Total Dirty Harry vibes. You didn't order a coffee to go, did you? That's how I felt when I went to a sketchy trap house with these dudes who had 10 deadbolts and then finally a 2x4 across the door, haha. As soon as the door shut I could have been stuck for the rest of my life and no one would have found me, but I cracked a joke. I felt like the funny man in Boondock Saints. I became a stand-up comedian. I went to buy a dime bag of pot, they gave me an ounce. He's the machine. And he fucks cats. I got mugged once and even though they only got $10 and half a pack of smokes from me, I promised it would never happen again. Fast forward a few years, a buddy and I are walking home from a party and I'm carrying some gear worth at least $1,000. We pass a group of 4 folks and 2 of them leave the group and start following us. Down the street are another 2 folks that suddenly start walking towards us. I tell my buddy we're crossing the street. All 6 of them also cross the street with us. Now knowing for sure what was about to happen, I hailed a cab that was passing and we jumped in. My buddy asks why are we cabbing it, you live a block away. I pointed to the 6 guys that were now just staring at the cab. Those folks were about to mug us, I say. I had to leave early one morning, like 4 a.m. early, and as I'm driving down a street that feeds onto a highway, I ran over this fairly large rock that made my car jump. It blended in perfectly with the foggy morning and the road and did enough damage to warrant me stopping and wanting to inspect. I pull over, dragging something under my car and throw the hazards on. Luckily, I looked back in my rear view before opening the door because 3 men were running towards my car from behind a bus stop. I said fuck it and drove onto the highway and got off the next exit. That area is always sketchy, crackheads standing in the middle of the street, dice games in the gas station parking lot, tent shelters, but this was a new tactic for me. Luckily the scraping was just the protective undercarriage of my car and I didn't damage anything vital. Paying attention to body language helps show the intent of whoever you're interacting with. I've seen a fair few clips online of people who clearly missed out on the body language of the person who was getting ready to punch them in the face. One of the best I've heard for novice level street smart levels is always look like you know where you are going and walk with purpose, as y'all look like a less easy mark than people nose deep in their phone and looking around confused. Yup. Walk purposely with your head up and on a swivel. No hesitation. Gotta keep your head on a swivel just in case you find yourself in a vicious cockfight. This should actually be number 1. Look like you belong wherever you are at and walk confidently. Don't be walking around like you're lost. Street smarts is more about how one carries themselves than any small tips. Never brag about anything.